Hi everyone, welcome to this Android webinar. We're going to discover Android with our graduates from the program, José, Nieto, and Francesca Cuda. My name is Anaïs, and I'm the community manager for Udacity in Europe. We are based out of Berlin, and this is our lovely office. So I'm just going to let José and Francesca introduce themselves really quickly, and then I'm going to make a couple of announcements. I'll remind you guys of the agenda for the webinar and the schedule, and then we'll start with the questions that you have provided us. José, Francesca, it's your turn.
Francesca, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. So I'm Francesca. Currently, I'm head of engineering at Ustwo. I graduated on Android Nanodegree back in beginning of 2016, and since there, lots of things have changes. But yeah, we can talk more later.
So I'm José. I also graduated end of 2016, and I'm currently working in Nodes, which is an agency based in London. And I'm also working with Udacity as an Android content developer for their courses.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for this lovely introduction. So to give you all a little bit of context, the reason why we are having this webinar is because we have just updated all of the content of our Android Developer Nanodegree, which means that all of the content that you guys now have in the program is completely up to date. And to promote the relaunch of this Android Nanodegree, we are also offering you guys a €200 discount on the one-time upfront payments. So what this means is that if you enroll before the 13th of September, you will get a €200 discount on the price if you pay everything upfront. So instead of paying €1,199, you will pay €999. So we are going to talk about the updated content, of course, but we're also going to walk you guys through what a nanodegree is, what kind of support you get with Udacity, and most importantly, what skills you're going to learn and how you can apply those to the real world, and how you can apply those to looking for a job as an Android developer. So I want to also thank all of you guys for sending really, really awesome questions. There were so many of them. It took us a lot of time to go through all of them. Obviously, as you can imagine, we won't be able to answer all of them. But we have selected the ones that came back the most often to make sure that we answer you guys' most pressing concerns. And another thing that I wanted to announce today is that we have some exciting news for next week. The first news is that Udacity will be at DroidCon in Berlin. We will be at DroidCon beginning of next week, and you can meet us there. And I know that José is going to be there. So that's quite exciting. And the second news is that Udacity will also have a presence at Google Developer Days in Krakow, also beginning of next week. So we're doing a lot of things at the same time. And I will be in Krakow on the 5th of September. So if you guys are there, you can meet me there. And José will be in Krakow on the 6th of September, traveling through all of Europe for you guys. So feel free to come reach out to us, come say hello, come ask questions. We'll be there for you guys. So without further ado, we can now start our webinar. Just to give you guys a little recap, the first half of the webinar, we're going to answer the questions that you have left us in the registration form. And the second half of the webinar is going to be dedicated to a live question and answer. This means that you guys can just leave us your questions. So you can leave your questions in the live chat. So on the right side of your screen on YouTube, you have a little thing called live chat. And you guys can just feel free to leave your questions there. The way we're going to do this is that we are going to monitor your questions. We're going to save them for later. And then when comes the time of the live Q&A, we'll make sure that we answer as many of them as possible. And again, there are a lot of you guys, so we'll just try to pick the ones that are coming back the most often to make sure that we give the best information to everyone. So José, Francesca, are you ready? Are you ready to start with the questions now?
Yes.
Perfect, let's start. So the first thing that I want to talk about with you guys is the Nanodegree program. What is a Nanodegree? And I think the best way to start talking about the Nanodegree program is to ask you guys why you decided to start a Nanodegree and what it brought you.
Well, in my case, I had done some Android courses online before, but I felt it was not enough. I think like, okay, I can make simple apps, but it's far from being enough to really being able to work on this. And I thought, well, probably the best thing is to look for a master's degree in mobile, because maybe only in Android is going to be too specific. And I spent months doing this. When I was one day ready to apply for one of the masters that I have chosen. And that day when I arrived home, I thought I had not checked my feeds. So I went to my feeds, and that same day in Google I/O, they had launched the Android. They had announced the Android Nanodegree back in 2015. So I went through that, and I thought, well, this is definitely what I'm looking for, and it's much better. And I never enrolled in the masters at the end. So that's why I enrolled, and for me, it has helped me to develop a career definitely in Android.
And for me, it was a slightly different experience. So I was already what we call a backend developer, writing API and backend services in Java. And I learned most of the Android on the job by pairing with other people that were trying their best to explain the activity lifecycle and all this type of thing. But when you learn on the job, you don't have actually the time to grasp the concept very well and deeply. So for me, it was just about, okay, this person told me how to write an activity, so I just copy. And because of my way of learning, I was looking for a course that was very practical things, where I could also learn the theory behind Android and write some proper application that I can see on my phone. Especially because coming from a backend, you don't have that satisfaction of seeing what you have produced on a phone. Is very difficult to achieve that building API. So the course, so at that point I look around, and the only offer I found that was giving me both sides, like the theory, but also the practice, was Udacity. So that was a very nice journey.
Thanks so much for sharing that, guys. And yeah, I think it's actually interesting because it shows that you can come from quite a lot of different backgrounds when you start a Nanodegree. I think it's a program that answers the needs of very different people. You know, some people are still in university, some people learn on the job, and I think there's something to find in there for everyone, like both of your experiences show. Now, I have a follow-up question for you, and I'm sure that you guys have a lot to say about that, because I'm sure that you also looked at the catalog of free courses before you decided to enroll in the Nanodegree. And it's a question that a lot of people have asked. So the question is, what is the advantage of a Nanodegree over free courses? And for example, like what is the support and experience like as a student in the Nanodegree program rather than in free courses?
Well, I think you can do the courses for free because the contents are available for free. You can enroll and go through the videos. The Nanodegree essentially is a set of courses put in order, in a logical order, following a full path. And also the benefits are, well, you get code reviews. So it means that for every project that you do and you submit, you have an expert that is reviewing your code and coming back with feedback on which things can be improved or which things you could do in a different or better way. And there's a lot of learning on that feedback. And also you get all this mentoring and one-to-one sessions I also remember we had the optional modules on career services. So you can check your CV or your LinkedIn profile, your GitHub profile, the things that can help you to get a job. And you can even do mock interviews and one-to-one sessions when you have questions. Obviously, at the end of the process, you get the certificate of achievement, right? But I think all these things together are a big extra, and the nano degree is very focused on employability. The objective is that you have real chances to get a job in the field after all.
I can only echo what José said, and specifically about the code review. So coming from a software background, for me, code review is a very important piece when you write software, because you had the chance to have another pair of eyes looking at that, and also you have some feedback and a real person you can start a conversation with. And Udacity was able to, with the nano degree, was able to do that while I was submitting. So the context of submitting the project and get the code review was for me very familiar to what I found every day when I'm at work and I work with other engineers on a project. What I found also quite interesting of the nano degree that I didn't find in the free course is additional resources. For example, one-to-one video chat with a mentor, or find the support to review your LinkedIn profile, and some other like GitHub, making sure that looks okay, your portfolio shine when you want to present that to the future employee. And I think this is something that you can really get from a course built in the way of a nano degree, rather than just learning the theory of Android with a free course and following your own pace. For the mentoring support, I think it was very nice to find to have someone that check in on you and making sure you are all right, you are progressing, and it kind of kept me motivated to just say, oh, this week I didn't do my homework, maybe better for me to like get going if I want to. Like, it's a nice way to challenge my motivation and making sure, hey, there is someone that cares that I continue the course and I'm also successful in completing the nano degree. That was very nice.
Thanks so much for sharing your experiences, guys. I find it really, really interesting, because I think there's two things, like in what both of you said, that are extremely important, not just to the learning process, but also to what you guys will potentially be doing every day as a software developer or an Android developer, mobile developer. And those two things are, like you were saying, Francesca, like you were saying, Jose, iteration. So the fact that you have to submit your project and you have to review it based on the comments of someone and the feedback of someone is actually very similar to the process that you guys will be experiencing in your job as an Android developer every day. If you do get a job as an Android developer, that's something that you will constantly have to do. And so the way that the course is built in the nano degree kind of reflects the way that you would be working in a real life environment. And the second thing that is obviously really important is the support. So we all know, obviously it's not easy to take a course by yourself in front of a computer, but what the nano degree gives you is it gives you support, and it means that you have to feel accountable for your work, because like Francesca was saying, there is someone who actually cares that you do your homework. And when, it's like having your mom when you're a child who's like, have you finished your homework? Have you finished your homework? And sometimes if your mom wasn't there, you wouldn't do your homework. So yeah, having that person who checks in on you is really important. And obviously, being in a community of students as well, if you are in a nano degree, you will be put in a Slack team. You will have a group of students who are studying at the same time as you. You can find people who are online at the same time as you that you can ask questions to, finding students who have the same maybe blockers or same obstacles, and just share your solutions and your tips together. So it also gives you that feeling of learning together and supported, and not just by yourself. Nice. So I now want to move on to questions that are more related to the curriculum and the content of the nanodegree. I think it's really important to get into this, especially because we are just relaunching this nanodegree with updated content. And I think the first question that we have to get to is more of a basic question that I'm sure all of you guys are wondering about. And so the question for you, José and Francesca, is about the scope of the nanodegree and what the students will actually learn in terms of skills in this program.
I'll leave this first to Francesca.
Cool. So what is interesting in the nanodegree is the wide range of topics that are covered through different application that you will be asked to build. So you start with something like popular movies, where just like present a list of movies and then details, so connecting also with an API. And then little by little, while you learn the theory, you also add more functionality in your, let's say, toolbox that you can reuse then in real case scenario. For example, you will learn about how configure your application to be free versus paid up, how you can create integrated libraries, and then move into material design. And personally, what I found very interesting is that all these building blocks that you cover through the course of the nanodegree, then you try to organically put together in the last project, where you also kind of challenge yourself to be a designer of your own app. So you have the capstone project at the end, where you really put two hats, the hat of like maybe a product person that think about your dream app that you want to build, or that you had in your mind, or in your like dream, and then actually do that in a way that if you want, you can also publish that on the Play Store.
Well, I will say I always understood the nanodegree as the range of skills that Google believes that as someone needs to develop a career or start a career in an Android. Because after all, the nanodegree and all the courses in Android are built in partnership with Google, right? So there is a tight relation there. And when I remember when I saw the nanodegree the first time, and I saw all the scope, as Francesca said, like you start with building a quite solid app from scratch, and then you have to perform some operations or improvements in apps that are already built with Gradle or maybe with material design, like one of the exercises of hypothesis. And the material design, you get the app works, but doesn't really look well, right? So you need to add all that there. And after all, as Francesca said, when you have the capstone, you can build, you have some a list of specs that you need to fulfill. And apart from that, you can build whatever you want. So you can just go crazy and create your dream app there. And it's a really awesome exercise. And after all, you get a portfolio of different apps that you build or improve in some way that you have on your GitHub, and you can share on your profile, on your CV, and show what you're capable to do. So, yeah.
Cool. Thanks so much, guys. I have a follow-up question for you, which is more about the requirements. So talking a little bit about, like what you knew already, what you guys knew already when you enrolled, but also what you think people need in order to enroll in this nanodegree. And specifically, you guys asked a lot of questions about Java and how much knowledge of Java was required in order to enroll in the nanodegree.
Maybe Jose, you can start.
Well, I will say in this case, from my perspective, for the nanodegree, you need to have certain knowledge of Java. I mean, the Java itself is not explained during the nano degree. It's assumed that you already know Java and have some experience coding. For those who don't know Java or don't have experience coding, we have the other nano degree, which is the Android Basics nano degree, which is more focused on people who have never coded before, and we have examples of students who had a completely different career and they never written a line of code. And in that nano degree, it starts with Java and the loops and everything, and goes gradually, and they end up with 10 apps built after the nano degree. So obviously it depends on where you are in knowledge on Java or experience in general coding, that you may want to take one or the other. So.
Yeah, I will tend to agree with what Jose said, and maybe on a more philosophical level, there are some people that say, oh, surely Java has the same construct of Python or C++, but actually it's not. Java will be your basics, but then on top of that, there are some specific consideration and things you will learn on top of your Java knowledge that it might be a big jump if you come from, let's say, Python or C++. So I'm very much about what Jose said about if you don't have that, maybe it will be better to start with the basics and then consider the nano degree at some point still in your career as like step 2. And also the other thing, regardless of the knowledge of Java, is also about dedication. And make sure that it's not that you know Java, so it's easy. There is still lots of other things to learn that are specifically on Android. That, for example, for me, that I was coming from a backend, I said, oh, Android is just Java in a small screen. It's not that. You will find that deep down is quite different, and there are some consideration to be made, probably because it's on a phone and not a big server.
Thanks for clarifying that, guys. And I also want to tell all of you who are watching that you can actually find the requirements for the nano degree on the landing page. So if you go to the Udacity site and you have a look at the landing page of the Android Developer Nanodegree, you will see that on top of the page you actually have a little thing on which you can click that has all of the requirements for the nano degree. So you can also double check with this if you're a little bit unsure. And like Jose said, so the Android Developer Nanodegree is really focused on taking you guys' career to the next level. It is absolutely 100% focused on employability at the end, which means that if you do not meet the requirements at the pre-requirements at the beginning, you could also have a look at the Android Basics Nanodegree, which is basically what comes before and what will prepare you for the Android Developer Nanodegree. So talking about employability, I actually want to get into that topic a little bit more, because I know that this is something really important for most of you guys. And I want to ask you, Francesca, and you, Jose, how it was for you to graduate from the nano degree, and specifically what your first project was after the nano degree, and how you progressively get into Android development.
Well, in my case, I started working before I finished the nano degree, so I was a bit lucky on that. I was trying to find a job, but I was like running in circles. Like, I don't get a job because I don't have commercial experience. I don't have commercial experience because I don't have a job. And I did first thing I did was an unpaid internship, part-time, working from home. So I had, as I said, I had not finished the nano degree yet by then. And after a month and a half or something like this, I was having 7 other interns and I was leading the team. So that's quite, I would say, obviously, I learned a lot, enough as to do that. And also, I have an interesting story when I got my first paid job. I had the interview, phone interview, and it was super technical. It was like when you go to an interview and you get so many questions. I was impressed, and I said, how long is the list of questions this guy has? And all super technical. And it was like, I don't know, 45, 50 minutes asking technical questions. So after that, the day after, the recruiter called me and she told me, well, you didn't pass. Yes, well, so okay, that's life. And 2 days after, the recruiter called me again and told me, well, they want to arrange a face-to-face interview with you. I thought like, okay, but why? Well, you told me 2 days ago I didn't pass. And it's like, well, they have other candidates and you don't have experience, and the other candidates have a lot of experience, and they thought, well, they will be better. And when they went to the interviews, it came out that I had done better than any of them without their experience. So it means like I knew the things very well after all. And then I got the job actually with them. So.
For me, it was a little bit different because I was already kind of try to be an Android developer. And then the nano degree kind of gave me that confidence on the concept of Android and activity lifecycle, content provider, all these things that, of course, if you learn on the job, they might not have the time to explain to you, because if it doesn't come up in the next feature, then you might never see that. So with that built-in confidence, my next job was tech lead for a mobile team. And in there, I actually found it that most of concepts like the lifecycle activity are things that you are able, when you talk about architecture, approach, with technical and also non-technical people, you need to be able to articulate in a way that makes sense. And you can only do that if you have a deep understanding of the concept and also they are fresh in your mind. So that helped me kind of like leading a team of Android developer after the nano degree. And what's interesting is that for my current job, the first thing they asked me was, do you have a GitHub repository? And in my life, I never badly take in consideration of building my portfolio on GitHub. And as a part of the nano degree, I was asked to actually put all my project there and everything. So I was quite glad. It was like a few moments where I said, yes, I have. And I'm actually very proud of that, because I know that all the projects that are there have been reviewed by an expert. So I can show a portfolio for my current job. So there was quite like, oh, I'm glad I did it moment.
Yeah,
I actually have a comment on the GitHub thing. And I had an interview, and one of the interviewers told me that he had been looking at my GitHub, and it was very good because he can see like the consistency of the commits, and that I was working on that on a daily basis, and I was showing or following the right flows on it, and that obviously gave me extra points. That is very good.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. GitHub is super, super important. And in the nano degree, this is something that you will be forced to do. So you won't have to worry about it afterwards. A question that we got from a couple of you guys was about employers who employ nano degree graduates in Europe. I'm actually the person who's able to answer that question better than Francesca and José, even though you guys can talk about yourselves. But to give you a little bit of an example of where we have graduates from the Android nano degree working at Ergo, we have a graduate working at Flixbus here in Berlin. We have a graduate working at Hewlett-Packard, another graduate working at Daimler. So we have graduates kind of everywhere. We also have a lot of graduates who either started their own company, are working for smaller startups, or like I just said, big names, let's say. So there are definitely employers who employ nanodegree graduates. This is not really a worry to have, especially because I think with Android, it is really important to show that you can do things. And what the nanodegree will give you is that it will give you concrete projects that demonstrate the skills that you have learned. So rather than having a piece of paper where you tell someone, well, yeah, I've learned all of those concepts, you actually have something to show for yourself, and you have something that proves that you can actually do the job. And that is super, super important. And that's also why GitHub is really important. So moving on from that question, since it's now 6:30, I'm just going to give you guys a little heads up. We're going to go through 2 more questions, and then we will start the live Q&A. So 2 more questions that you guys have already sent us, and then I'll announce the live Q&A, and you guys can just send us your questions in the little window that's the live chat on YouTube next to the video. Just leave your questions there, and we will monitor everything and try to answer as many as possible. So the next question for you guys is, it's quite a broad question, and I think what's interesting here is to hear both of your opinions on the topic. The question is, what is the job market like? What are career options for Android developers in Europe? And for example, is it possible to pursue a career as a remote Android developer? I'll let you guys talk now.
Well, I would say I think we cannot really say how it's in Europe, because we don't know for every country or every place, right? But I know how it is in London, and I can more or less guess that it would be probably similar in other places. Compared to other fields, like, for example, web development or something like this, I noticed that the projects in Android are usually shorter, more likely, compared to our web development, right? So companies try to get more senior people, and that's a bit of a problem. So I found that in the market there are not so many junior roles, and there's a lot of competition for those roles. So it means, like, compared to a senior, like a senior can apply to more roles in quantity, and for each role needs to compete with less people than a junior in Android, right? And that's why I think it's really important to be well prepared and well equipped. Like the example that I gave just before, that I was having interviews, and then I did better than other people that have experience, is kind of the thing that you really need. You need your CV to shine, to have a portfolio, and to be able to pass the technical questions, obviously. So it's a bit tough at the beginning, because, as I said, there's a lot of competition. But if you are well prepared, you can do it. And we know many students who have gone into their first role. So.
And right now I'm based in London, and I can see that there are lots of Android developers out there. But as Jose was saying, they all need to pass a technical assessment at some point. And having even popular movies up already on your GitHub that you can take as a reference and quickly turn around and complete the technical assessment is a bigger advantages that we shouldn't underestimate, I would say. And then once you are in a company or in a team, I've heard from friends working also in the Android space, there are lots of very exciting projects, from automotive to health, to wearables and TV that are quite exciting. So, and this doesn't limit to London, especially in the team I'm working on, there are people remote from Spain, people from north of UK. So I think with tools like Hangout and Skype or Slack, now the barrier between like being in London or being in Spain or in Germany are much, much lower. So that can also be an option.
Yeah, definitely agree. Thanks so much for your answers, guys. We're actually now going to move to the last question that we have prepared from you guys' questions. And that question is more related to Android specifically, but I think it's something that a lot of you are wondering about. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit with you guys about what you predict with the announcement of Kotlin, and if Kotlin is going to take over Java tomorrow. What are your guys' predictions on that? And do you think that this will affect the employability of graduates of the program?
Well, I think the transition to Kotlin is not going to happen from one day to another. Obviously, Fortune 500 companies use Java, and that's kind of the standard, I would say. I will also find particularly weird if I have a candidate who knows Kotlin and doesn't know Java. That would be extremely weird. So at the moment in the Nano degree, Java is the standard. We are not supporting Kotlin so far, but we listen to the students and we know how the market is and how the tech is in the field. We are in the process of considering to add Kotlin, but probably as a separate complementary course, probably not part of the Nano degree. I guess that in the long term, it will be also accepted to submit projects and have parts of the content of the Nano degree in Kotlin. But, well, time will say, and the transition is, as I said, it's going to take some time.
I actually have a real-life situation. That when Kotlin went out, one of the projects I had to be the tech lead here in Ustwo was about, oh, do we need to do a big migration into Kotlin? What does it mean for me as a big company asking us a consultancy on that? And we actually write a like big document about what's pro and cons. And at the end, the point was, okay, if I need to carry on this Android app and I need to find people out there and I need to make sure it's stable and robust, will it make sense for me to move now into Kotlin? And the final answer was actually no, because there were so many few people knowing Kotlin in a kind of a scale that they have done like application already in the store and with the massive use base that the client himself was feeling a little bit uncomfortable of moving there. And I mean, for us it's quite easy, like you can open the IDE and you can convert a domain object, but then there is also, okay, this app needs to go on the Play Store, and how confident we are to build something with such a new technology, with something that we are not a proficient in. So for now is Java.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks so much for giving your perspective on that. And yeah, absolutely, I agree. I think it's important to remember that just because a new technology emerges doesn't mean that from one day to the other everything changes. This is the kind of things that always takes a little bit of time. So guys, like I announced at the beginning of the webinar, we are now going to move to a live Q&A. And what live Q&A means, it means that it's a live questions and answers. So you are able to write down all of your questions on the right side of your screen in the YouTube live chats, and then we're just going to be monitoring them and going through as many of them as possible until the end of the webinar. And just as a reminder, in case there is anyone who is joining now and wasn't with us at the beginning, we have a couple of announcements. The first one is that early next week we will be at DroidCon in Berlin. So if you are in Berlin, you can come and say hi at our stall, say hi to Udacity and ask all of your questions. The second one is that I will be in Krakow in Poland for Google Developer Days on the 5th, and José will be there on the 6th. So you guys also have a possibility to meet us there if you want, and you can just get in touch. And the third thing is that the reason why we are having this webinar is because we just relaunched the Android Developer Nanodegree, and there is completely updated content. It's solely up to standards with the current job market. And in order to promote this, we are offering you guys a 200 euros discount if you pay everything upfront. But this is only valid until the 13th of September. So in order to benefit from this 200 euros discount, you need to enroll in the program before the 13th of November. And then usually the nanodegree takes, the Android Developer Nanodegree takes on average 8 months to finish, so you guys can have a good estimation of when you should be done with it. So now I've made those announcements again, we're going to move to the live Q&A. And I actually already have the first question for you guys, so I'm just going to ask you the questions that pop up in the live chat, and then you guys feel free to just, either of you, take it whenever you want, okay? The first question is from Zolt, who asks, what about architecture? Is there something specific you need to follow during the course? And I'm guessing that person is talking about app architecture.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of architecture, what is contained on the nanodegree would be the basic standard architecture that all vanilla has. So I can say that we are in the work on adding some more specific architecture things, particularly Google announced on Google I/O this year the Android architecture patterns. But obviously this is work in progress, and it will take some time until that translates into the nanodegree.
So yeah, I think the nanodegree doesn't cover specific context about architecture. However, once you have the concept of view, model, controller, or presenter, then will be easier to take a repository like the one of Google Android team that they share publicly with all sample app of different architecture and actually understand how that works, because this is just like making sure how the pieces are connected, how the pieces are put together in the application. But without having the initial concept, then it became even more difficult to understand the sample code.
The next question is from Nicolo, and Nicolo asks, is there a part in the nanodegree about writing good project documentation?
Not really. I don't think there's any part about documentation, to be honest.
Thanks, Jose. The next question is from Sarah. Sarah asks, is there a course that covers writing both Android and iOS apps? And I don't think that we have a nanodegree that covers both iOS and Android, right?
We actually have one, which is the React Native.
That's true.
Which is a quite brand new course. I think the first cohort is less than 1 month ago. But that's completely different, because that's not native apps. Is you build the apps with basically JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and well, all the React native things, and they compile to both platforms. But it's different than building native apps. So.
And actually, Sarah has a follow-up question for you guys. And I'm not sure if you have like a definitive opinion on this, but Sarah asked, if I wanted to write my own app, which nanodegree would you then recommend?
Francesca, you want to?
Well, I will still go for Android, considering the number of people, according to the last stats, that own an Android phone. I think it was about 1 billion or something like that. I don't remember the exact number. Don't quote me. But I will go for that one as an emerging platform at first, and then test the market, understand how these go, and eventually move into iOS.
Yeah, I would say that probably depends on your objectives and your knowledge, your previous knowledge. If you have some experience coding and you know Java, maybe Android makes more sense. If you feel more comfortable with Swift, then iOS. At the same time, if you don't have experience coding, then we have in Android, we have the Android basics. There's nothing similar in iOS. And also, I would say something to have into consideration is to build apps for iOS, you need a Mac, and not everyone has a Mac. While for building Android apps, you can do in any computer, whatever it is, Mac, Windows, Linux, doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, Jose. I have two questions that I think we can kind of have together because they're more related to the time that you should dedicate to your studies. First question is from Manish, and Manish asks, can we finish a nano degree in less than 8 months or in a fast pace? And the second question, which is kind of related to this as well, is another question from Sarah, who asked how much time per week she should be devoting to any course. So if you guys want to share a little bit your experience about how long it took you, yeah, that would be great.
Well, the okay. For the nano degree, you can complete in less than 8 months. I mean, it's completely up to you. Obviously, if you can put more time or more effort, let's say hours per week on it, you will do it faster. Mostly you do on your own pace. They are not hard deadlines. They are recommended deadlines. You get like well, more or less an estimate on when you should be finishing certain things to keep on track. But obviously, well, it depends on everyone. And time is recommended about 10 hours per week, average.
Maybe I can talk about my personal experience. So because I had a full-time job, for me it was very difficult to then come back home and like do some coding of the lesson or of the project. So my approach was downloading from the app the lesson, so I can listen at least to the theory about the lesson during my journey to and from work. And then maybe spend my weekend completing the project or the assignment. And overall, I think that will took me around the same number that Jose said, about 10 hours a week. But again, depends on if you have commitment, if you have a full-time job and these type of things. So it's quite personal.
Absolutely. And I think no matter what, whether you have a full-time job or not, I mean, obviously it's harder if you have a full-time job. But I think no matter what, whether or not you have a full-time job, it's all, at the end of the day, it's all about commitment, and it's also all about coming back to your course regularly and making sure that you're keeping yourself as well accountable for having that little schedule for yourself and really sticking to it. We have another question from Nicolo, who asks how often they can schedule a one-on-one appointment with a mentor. Was there a limit for you guys, and if it was via chat or video chat? And I'm curious, actually, did you guys use the mentors a lot?
I really don't know about this, to be honest. I don't know if there's a limit or not. By the time that I was a student, you didn't have those mentors, because something that I found is Udacity keeps on improving everything. So in the future, probably we'll have new things. And for the one-to-one sessions, they were like they call office hours, but I didn't use them, so I really don't know.
I don't remember that. I remember that in another nano degree I've done later on, where the mentor was available. He was tried to check in with me once a week. But again, it was in a separate nano degree, because when I took the nano degree, there was not the concept of the check-in with the mentor.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are both right. There is a lot of functionalities within the nano degrees that we just keep on adding progressively based on people's feedback and how we can improve the student experience, and the one-on-one with the mentors is definitely that. I'm not exactly sure how often exactly you can book an appointment, a one-on-one with a mentor, but I would suggest to Nicolo to just send this question to support, because everyone that we have working on support is extremely knowledgeable about everything about the nano degrees. And so for those very rare questions that we can't answer, I'm sure that they can provide you with the right answer. We now have a question from Jason, who asks, does the course have any content related to the very latest versions of Android, such as Android 7 or 8, as Google announced recently that the mechanism for background services was changing?
Well, I can actually have a good question. I will answer for that. Well, as I'm a graduate, but now currently I'm also part of the development team in Udacity. And I've been working on that myself in the last few weeks. Essentially, I would say for the background thing, the way that Udacity teaches matches the way that it should be. So the answer would be yes. And I've been updating some contents that are not live yet, because Android O is not live yet. For example, in notifications, the mechanism for the notifications is different in Android O, which essentially, if you target the latest Android version, your notifications will break. And I've been updating the apps that use notifications, and we need to update the videos that we'll be doing soon, probably shortly before to be ready for the time that Android O is completely launched. So yeah, we try to do all these things. Obviously, there are functionalities in the new versions that maybe are not so relevant or are too specific to be explained in the course. But for those things that have an impact on, or we believe that students should know, we add them, we modify, and if we need to update something, we do. Yeah.
Thanks, Jose. That's super insightful. I'm actually, sadly, going to announce that this is almost the end of this webinar, since we are closely approaching the end of the hour. So I will ask you guys one more question from the live chat. For all of you guys who have asked questions that haven't been answered, I'm really sorry that we didn't get to it. But remember that we have an amazing support team. So if you have a question that is really important to you that hasn't been answered, you can always write to support@udacity.com, and then you will have someone that will answer your question specifically. And we're also going to make sure to send a follow-up email so you can have all of that information again in a written form. So maybe the last question for you guys before we close this webinar is a question from Karel, and Karel asks, could I complete the free courses first and then get involved in the nano degree, if it would make sense? And then if you guys have anything to add at the end, I'm also really happy to let you have a little closing chat.
Well, Francesca, you want to?
Well, I think the free course will give you an initial overview of Android, and some of the concept, you will find that some of the concept might be similar with the nano degree. So depending what you are looking for in the nano degree and what you are trying to achieve, you might want to consider either or. From personal experience, I would say if you need to make an investment in learning of Android, I will go straight into the nano degree, unless you're thinking about Android basics.
Yeah, I would say that I remember recently I was speaking with someone, and then they said, so you took the nano degree? And I say, well, I went through the contents, but I didn't pay. And I feel like, well, so does it mean that you went through the nano degree, or does it mean that you didn't? Because for me personally, it means like she didn't, because through all that process, well, maybe she completed the projects, but she assumed that she would have passed the evaluation from the reviewer. And it's like you go to the university, but if you don't take the exams, you have not really complete the degree, right? So I felt a bit like something similar. So it's if you go through the nano degree properly, in all that process, you have the mentor and you have someone you can ask, and then you benefit on all those things as you go, and then you have the code reviews, and the code reviews you get, oh, this you can do better like this, or the reviewer points you to some documentation that you have missed, or this, and then in the next project you go better. And even if you fail the review, you can submit again and have more insights on the code that you've written. So I will try to go through all the process properly, to be honest. That's what my approach would be. Still, sorry, I will add something. I think it makes sense if you want, well, you have like 1 week, I think, trial, the first week, which also makes sense to have a taste of how everything is and what you can really expect, how the contents are and the quality of what you get. So that's really also good.
Yeah, agreed. And I will also add actually that if you guys enroll in the nano degree, make sure that you make as much use as possible of that first week of trial. So make sure that you use all of the functionalities that are available in the nano degree, just to get a feel for whether or not those extra functionalities actually will help you. Because staying 1 week in a free trial and using it as a free course, you won't necessarily get a feel for what it would be like. So if you do enroll, make sure that you make as much use as possible of that first 3 week of trial. So thank you so much, guys, for joining, Francesca and Jose. It's been really, really awesome to have you here in this webinar. And I just had a look again at the live chat, and I know that people are also really happy. So thanks once again to take the time to do that. I also want to thank Chris. You guys don't know him yet, but Chris is joining the Berlin team as a community operations manager. So he's going to be introducing himself to all of you guys very soon, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot from him in the coming month. And finally, I want to remind all of you that we have a discount running on Android Developer Nanodegree. So I'm going to update the description of the video. In the description of the video, I will put links to all the references that we mentioned, and I will most importantly put the links to the landing page. If you go on the landing page of the Nano Degree, you will see that we have a discount running until the 13th of September, which is only in 10 days or so. Until the 13th of September, if you enroll and choose the one-time upfront payments, you will save 200 euros. So you will pay 999 euros instead of 1,199 euros. If you guys have any follow-up questions, you can just send them to support. So you can write to support@udacity.com. And again, all of you guys who registered for the webinar will get a follow-up email, and in the follow-up email you will also again have all this information. You will have the information about the discount and the information about how to enroll for the Nano Degree. Thank you so much for watching. As per usual, it's been a blast to host this webinar from Berlin, even though I would love to meet all of you guys in person rather than on video. And I really hope that you enjoyed this webinar, and I hope to see you soon for another webinar. Bye, guys.